Welcome everybody to ICAW's live webinar session. I'm Eileen, an Executive Counselor from UKC Careers Office, and I'll be your MC for today. Today, we have representatives from ICAW to speak on how chartered accountants save the world. The session will start off with a presentation, followed by a Q&A session. So throughout the session, participants, if you have any questions, do put them in the chat box, and our moderator will be addressing them later. Now, I would like to introduce our moderator, Ms. Law Wei Yuen, Head of ICAW Malaysia. Now, I'll pass the mic to our moderator.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Irene. And hello and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And my name is Law Wei Yuen, and I'm the head of ICAW Malaysia. So today's topic, we talk about how ICAW Chartered Accountants save the world. And interestingly, it's basically we're talking about sustainability. Now, sustainability has now been integrated into mainstream businesses, and in the accounting profession, it is at the heart of it. And sustainability and climate change are among one of the most pressing problems facing our world today. And it's no surprise that the sustainability and climate change agenda is fast becoming the lens through which a business is judged by its consumers, workforce, society, and even its investors. So as trusted advisors of all types of businesses, chartered accountants are well placed to drive the sustainability agenda and turn the ambition of a low carbon world into reality. So this evening and this afternoon, those in the UK, we will have a very interesting and educational session. Dr. Faiz, PwC Executive Chairman, ICAW Fellow Member, and ICAW Council Member for Malaysia. Dr. Faiz, I could spend a long time actually reading out your CV, and over 35 years of experience in audit and business advisory, and have led many exciting projects, which I really enjoyed listening to. Would you like to say a few words that is not in your CV that the audience would like to get to know you better?
Well, maybe since the topic, and thank you, Ian, maybe since the topic is sustainability, a fun fact, we've had our sustainability practice in PwC since 2007. In fact, it was myself that was one of the founder partners in that practice. And the reason was that actually a lot of our clients were finding it very difficult listing abroad, especially if they had plantation or forestry behind them, right? So firstly, it's something which I've been tracking now for quite a long time. But the fun fact is, I only really got to understand this because my daughter insisted on me watching The Inconvenient Truth with her, and made the point at the end that my generation was screwing it up for hers, and what was I personally doing about it? So that's why we set up the practice.
Thank you, and it is quite a few movies that is still then, and I will share a bit more with the audience what are the key movies or shows that we do to promote the awareness. Encik Nick Rizal, you were the Executive Director of Khazanah before your current role as the CFO of RHB Group Berhad. Your CV is equivalent long, and
not as long as Dr. Faiz, for sure.
It's only because I'm older.
Only slightly.
Could you share a few things about you as well?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Yuen. It's nice to see you again, and also Dr. Faiz, who actually I haven't seen for a while, I think since the pandemic, because of the movement and stuff like that. But no, we've had our interactions in the past. I suppose, well, if you want to know an interesting fact, as you rightly pointed out, Yuen, I was an executive director in Khazanah prior to joining RHB last year. I was there for about 10 years. And one of the areas which I was looking at, actually two of the areas which is quite pertinent to where our topic of discussion today. One was actually I was overseeing the sustainable development segment or sector for Khazanah, and under there we had a waste management company who's doing quite well, which also doing waste to energy type of projects, and also a biogas to energy type of company, right? A biomass. Sustainable or renewable energy type of company, and Khazanah as a sovereign wealth fund for Malaysia has actually been looking in this space for quite a number of years. right? Way back in 2008, roughly just after when Dr. Faiz set up the Sustainability Council for PwC. So it's not a new topic per se, but even until today, what I can say is, even for me as a chartered accountant, and now a banker, well, I don't know, yeah, I suppose I can call myself a banker because I work in the bank now. It's still a very relatively new topic, but I can see the acceleration in terms of the adoption and the need to really understand, embrace, and also start practicing sustainable kind of like practices, not only within your organization, but also in terms of your stakeholders. And for example, like a bank, how does this relate to the customers and also the segments that you, for example, lend out to? So it's still, very much a new, I still think that it's quite a new, it's not a new topic per se, but it's still, the world is at the stage whereby we're still sort of like grappling with how is the best way for us to do this, right? And I think it was evident from COP26, which happened not that long ago, that you can see, I tried to follow some of the conversations. You can see that the understanding level was not really to the point of coming up with really defined solutions to tackle some of the issues. They're still very much talking about policies, the 30,000 feet kind of like view. So yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation, and look forward to sort of like contributing on the panel.
Thank you. Thank you. I think
just ask a question of Nick, Wayan. That biomass thing, was that your farting cow project in New Zealand?
That one actually produced a lot of methane, but I think as much as we tried to, I think capturing that methane was proving to be a little bit of a problem. No, the biomass one was taking some palm oil effluent stuff and converting it to energy. Yeah, the company is called Synergy. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I remember the farting cow, or rather the burping cows.
The burping cows, yeah.
The smell of the methane is not, I'm sure it's really, really not pleasant at all.
And funny enough, a true fact is that's like the one, or probably one of the highest, if not the highest contributor to air pollution, the methane from
emissions.
Cows.
And emissions, because methane
and emissions,
yeah. So I know Tan Sri Jamila is now a vegetarian because of that.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Right. So tonight, this afternoon, that's what I started to say earlier, that for the people coming on this session today, it will be very interesting, and they will learn a lot as well. So, but before we start, I know we are on the panel session. We can't really see who they are, and I do have a platform here, and they can actually key in on the web kind of thing. And I just ask for those people who are in the audience, if they could just kind of tell us, because Dato' Faiz read law at Durham before he was called to the bar, and then he did his chartered accountancy. Encik Rizal did accounting economics at the University of Bristol, and he had a master's in London Business School, and then he did ICW as well. I read biochemical engineering at UCL before I did ICAW as well. So it's quite nice if people could drop in as we go along. I can actually see it onto my other device here. If you could tell us a little bit about where you are from, what course you're doing, what course you're reading, and from which university, so that we can also get a little bit of context so that we know where you are from as well. So if I could see any, I was kind of like drop in here. Right. Before we start, just give you a little bit a preview on what this session would be like. So this panel session, we will only look for 3 questions because time is usually we have a lot to share. So we don't want to cover by lots and lots of questions, and we also allow time for you to ask any questions involved. And basically we would take them in the flow because we talk about sustainability, we have a lot of people talking about UN SDG and basically like why, why the chartered accountants, why are we getting involved, and why businesses have to get involved. And then again, will lead to the next question on why there's a sudden focus, not just on the 17 SDG goals, and suddenly we're talking about, climate change and biodiversity, and how is it linked to business? And of course, being chartered accountants here, and in this session here, all 3 of us here are chartered accountants, and we feel that being a chartered accountant itself is a sustainable career. And you being on this session here, really you want to find out more about what we always call about future-proofing your career, try to find out a little bit what it is like being an ICW member. Right, and I have some that says that they are studying IT. Some of them, there's one that says they're from Malaysia studying medicine. Right, as we go along. Very good. So maybe I start first so we can see two that's already in here who are not accounting and finance students, one IT and one in doing medicine. Maybe the others will start to drop in terms of who they are and what they're studying, so we get a view. So the first question today is really talking about today's theme on being how chartered accountants save the world. The current buzzword is about sustainability, UN, SDG. You hear things like ESG, environmental, social, and government. And again, like here, we see that we have students coming in from different backgrounds, reading different disciplines, attending this session. And perhaps we can share a little about what does UN SDG mean and why businesses have to be involved. You got a little bit of flavor just now, but maybe we go in depth a little bit. Maybe the question to Dato' Faiz, you are the ICW Global Council member for Malaysia, and you have been championing the sustainability agenda for many years. Would you share with the students here today, whether they're accounting students or not, whether they end up as a professional accountant or not, why are these goals so important in today's and tomorrow businesses, especially for them?
Thanks, Wei Yan. So maybe just some definitions. When we talk about SDG, it's basically, these are 17 goals that the UN and various member countries have signed up to in 2015. Basically, they've all signed up to 17 goals and 169 targets. But if you look at the history, really it's about trying to get consensus in the world about how to help communities and people. So I guess the sub-theme to the 17 SDGs or sustainable goals is about not leaving anyone behind. So that's why if you look at the 17, it does talk about, alleviating the poor, for example, education, diversity, and so on. Even climate is relevant, that there is a SDG 13 on climate action. And that is the one that people tend to focus on if you're looking at the current emissions issues. Okay, so basically, as a planet, we've come together and agreed these goals, and the end date was meant to be after 2030. Right, so that's the UN SDG. As a country, it is not legally binding on us, but the government has done what they recommended, which is setting up a framework to implement this. And I think Nick and I were both in London with the finance minister. I remember the finance minister making a point that actually, as part of our Malaysia plan, and also as part of our budget, they do try to calibrate what we're doing against those SDGs. So there is an analysis done by the government trying to show that, for every budget area or for every item within the 12 Malaysia plan, how does that impact the SDG commitments? So while it's not legally binding on us, as a country, we follow it. The final point really is, how does that then relate to businesses and perhaps the students looking for jobs in the corporate sector? So in tandem with this thinking about, doing better and helping communities, corporates have essentially been told off that this thing about profit maximization, the famous phrase, greed is good, is completely out. So 20, 30 years ago, the thinking now is about that planet and people are just as important as profit. And so that kind of thinking has, in a way, created this thing called ESG. And you mentioned it's about environment, social, and governance. And that's the metrics that corporates are being measured against. So in the Malaysian context, environment is, of course, the emissions done by, for example, Malaysian utilities, oil companies, transportation, and so on. But let's not forget the social part. So, for example, you may have read in the papers about the US customs seizing certain items, right? That's on the S side, the social part, because the social part assumes that we have both committed and are complying with the ILO rules, the 11 indicators. And of course, G is the governance part, meaning to say that the way you manage the business must be transparent to its shareholders in general terms. So ESG is in a way still drawing from the SDG, but it's a bit more relevant to the companies, and it's also relevant to their businesses. So I think that's how I would try to link SDG to ESG and corporates. The final word is really this thing about, accountancy in the world. Actually, I remember when I was recruited to be an accountant, since you mentioned about my legal background, the person who recruited me was a bit surprised to hear that my impression of accountants are that we were bean counters or bookkeepers. What I didn't know then, which I do know now, is that actually that's quite far from the truth. Meaning, as an accountant, you're actually a financially literate person within a corporate. And it's not an accident that so many CFOs end up being CEOs, right? Because they're one of the few people in the C-suite who actually understands how the business is reflected in numbers. And so I guess that comes to the importance of accountants, even in the sustainability arena. Firstly, they recognized that the accountants came up with an international standard when other bodies failed to do so on the sustainability side. So you might have heard of the ISSB being set up in Frankfurt, and basically they're taking people from the IASB, the body that sets out accounting standards. And really the thing they're saying to us is, well, you accountants succeeded in getting a global standard for accounting. Can you now save the planet by coming out with a similar standard, but for disclosures? Because you can't make decisions about supporting a company or not without those disclosures. So one is that it's natural that accountants get involved in this because disclosures will be, finally there. Second point is ICW is kind of unique, because we don't really care what degree you did. So Wei-Yuan, you've got biochemistry as a background. I'm a lawyer. My daughter, who's ICW, is did molecular genetics. Nothing to do with the business. And the reason why we prefer people who don't have accounting and finance is it goes to the point of diversity. We need different kinds of people now, particularly in accounting firms. So I'm looking for IT guys because there's a lot of data that needs to be crunched. I'm looking for engineers because ultimately we need to find solutions for clients, which are not necessarily just numbers. I'm also looking for medics because I think public healthcare is going to be a huge issue in the future. And already you might have heard the minister, KJ, come up with a statement saying that there will be a white paper later this year because he realizes it's too important to leave it to the vagrancies of each minister. So just to conclude on that, I think that chartered accountants are in a very unique position because we understand the language of business, which is numbers, but we come from different backgrounds. That means that we can relate to what is being discussed. And I think later Nick can share with you that his accounting background and even the sustainability work, I'm sure was helped by the fact he had that knowledge to start off with.
Thank you. Actually, Dato, you're actually really, really right. So the more names are coming through, we have, surprisingly, after the IT and the medicine, studying medicine at Sheffield, we have maths with stats at Imperial College. There is more engineering, more law. There are some accounting and finance from Cardiff, masters in advanced financial analysis in Lancaster, economics, and there's a whole lot of different, again, a very wide range of students from different background on this session here tonight. So, yeah.
Yep, we definitely need all kinds, not just accounting.
Fantastic.
Great. So over to you, Nick. So we mentioned just now you were in Khazanah. You were previously the private equity head for North America, Europe, Middle East, Africa. Actually, it's quite a wide range, and in India, in Khazanah, and you are now the chief CFO in RHB. And I guess no matter how large or small and of whatever industry that you're in, all companies will contribute to the SDG and again the reporting of the ESG in there. In your experience, could you share how some companies have embedded sustainability or ESG into their business strategy, and how whether as an investor or when you're working in Khazanah, and you mentioned a little bit more just now about the biomass, and also now at your role, how do you see some of these companies? Could you just share with the students so they can put into context on, sure. We talk about the definition, how it now is put into practice. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. No, okay, will do. So I think that's in my sort of like career I've been involved in, and I'm pretty sure that it's the same with Dato' Faiz as well. He's still in practice, basically, that you come across various companies in various industries and segments and sectors, right? So I was fortunate enough in Khazanah, as I alluded to earlier, to not only looking at sustainable development sector, but I was also overseeing the telco, media, and technology sector. Again, when you talk about the sector kind of like exposure and how they are embracing and adopting, let's say, SDG or ESG, is varied, right? It's varied in terms of the company's maturity. It also varies in terms of what they are actually providing. And when we talk about geographically speaking, as what you mentioned, when I was overseeing private equity for North America, India, where else? Middle East, and also for Europe, you could see the divergence in terms of the adoption of SDG or even ESG in the different geographies. Obviously, in somewhere like the US, there's a much more openness to adopt that kind of basically ESG into the considerations in terms of how a company is to be built, as opposed to, let's say, for somewhere like in India, when it's still very much focused on the dollar and cents side of it, right? So to think about, okay, I'm just trying to summarize, maybe an easy way for me to do it, and again, to speak on my recent or current experience, is to maybe speak a little bit in terms of what RHB is doing in the space of SDG and also ESG, right? Because that's probably a bit more relevant, and also gives a flavor in terms of what a big public listed company in Malaysia is doing, particularly in this space, right? So in RHB itself, our board actually approved a 5-year sustainability strategy and framework last year, way back last year, 2021. And this has been subsumed into a major component of the group's longer term corporate strategy, which will then run between 2022 to 2026. So a big area which underpins the sustainability strategy and framework is the formation of the Group Sustainability Committee, which is a management-led committee that deliberates and also provides strategic guidance on sustainability and climate action-related matters for the whole group. Yeah, so this group essentially is made up of management. It's chaired by the Group Managing Director. And obviously, the committee then reports essentially to the board. What is unique to RHB is that within this sustainability committee, there are 4 sustainability councils, right? Each accounting for a unique nature of activity within the larger banking group. For example, the first council that we have is the Sustainable Banking Council, and that's chaired by the head of our commercial banking. The second council is around ESG, Capital Markets and Advisory Council, which is chaired by our group treasurer. Third is the Sustainable Insurance Council, which is actually chaired by the COO of our RHB Insurance. And fourth is the Responsible and Sustainable Practices Council, which is essentially a team that reports to the Group Chief Operating Officer. From this 4 council itself, you can see that it's quite divergent and quite diverse in terms of, one, the areas that we're looking at, but secondly, the people that is tasked to champion it. And within the council, it's already made up of people from various disciplines and various qualifications within the group as well. So it's becoming really a group-wide collective effort to be able for us to essentially tackle the issues around SDG and also ESG. So even for a banking group like RHB, is becoming a very, very important area. And that's actually also driven by our regulator, Bank Negara Malaysia, which is already has already come up with certain policies, and in the future will be adopting other policies which is more global in nature. For example, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, right? TCFD. So all those will then culminate in terms of not only how, the way I see it, how RHB tackles and thinks about ESG, but it will then also mean, what does it mean to our stakeholders, including our customers and our clients, right? So it'll be far-reaching, not just only internal looking, but it will also be external looking in terms of how RHB, and again, RHB is just like one piece in a whole big jigsaw, right, of whole corporate Malaysia. And corporate Malaysia, again, is another piece of a jigsaw, which is part of the global ecosystem, if you like.
And if I can just add on to Nick's point. So what Nick has described is really the embedding into the strategy itself, sustainability. So it's not like CSR, which is a department and they do pretty pictures in the annual report. It's fundamental to the strategy. The second point, which in a way Nick referred to, but maybe just to pull it out, is RHB are not a board or management full of tree huggers. I mean, yeah, it'd be nice to say the planet, but fundamentally it goes back to managing risk. A customer that is not aware of the implications of climate change on their business, and also whether it's ES or G, is actually a poor customer. Meaning eventually it could mean that customer is either a bad insurable risk or that they may not pay back money. So banks are looking at it really from a risk perspective. Of course, and then when you talk to the corporates, they're looking at it from an existence point of view, which is their business still compatible with the planet? So if you are into extraction industries, oil and gas, and so on, the challenge for them is, how do you pivot away from an oil-based economy to one that's not, right? So you've got those customers, those companies. Then you have the other ones, which are ones who support them, or basically sell products to other customers around the world. They are under a lot of pressure because they're being judged not by Malaysian standards, but by standards abroad. So a good example is the one I referred to, where 8 Malaysian companies have been hauled up at the US Customs and Border Protection, and we are being judged by American standards on ILO, right? So it's not even local standards. So for a corporate, firstly, you do have to incorporate it into your strategy, because if you don't, how do you demonstrate to your fund providers like banks or the capital markets that you know how to manage those risks? And obviously for some corporates, it's much bigger than others. So if you're in the oil and gas utilities, it's a bigger issue than, let's say, if you were just building houses, right? The second one, of course, is that the disclosures are coming, meaning to say that your inability to explain your story could be very damaging to both your share price and your availability of funding. So that's why it's a big, big issue with the boards. And I think I agree with Nick. It's a bit of a shock to some of them, to be honest. But when you have, rubber companies and palm oil companies having goods being seized, it kind of wakes them up, right? Because suddenly they realize that actually it's not about Malaysian standards anymore. It's the international expectations.
Yeah. So for our students that are online today, and they will be the future workforce, and we talk about how important is in the corporate sector into the strategy. And quite quickly, before we go, I mean, of course, we're doing into the for the student career in the last question. But how quickly could you quickly kind of like just give an overview that how they as a student can contribute or even drive this important agenda when they join the workforce? Because seeing that it is so important in all the corporate, and they're already embedding into their strategy. Dr. Faiz, would you like to share a few words?
So if I take my daughter as an example, I think one thing that she realized is that you cannot be relevant to a business now unless you have data analytical skills. So luckily she married, well, can I describe me as being a bit of a nerd? And so her skills have really improved. So one is actually your data skills, I think, is going to be more and more called upon. And who better than an accountant? After all, we deal with these numbers all the time. But I'm saying that these numbers will also have to be disclosed at some point. For example, your sustainability disclosures, emission numbers, and so on, right? So that's one. Two is, I was reading the FT last week in London, as one does. And there was a whole article by, it was in the section relating to HR, talking about the Great Resignation and, of course, people running around trying to do different things. But one of the things it said was that, and the context was, this was asset management in the UK. They're saying unless you have something about sustainability on your CV, you're going to lose out. So they kind of assume you're a lawyer or anchor or whatever, the basic background. But because ESG is such a big topic, they're finding that, they may have guys at the top who understand it, and maybe some of the key managers, but they expect the knowledge to be even at the bottom end when you're joining. So their basic message was, it's difficult to see how you can get a job in the City of London unless you can demonstrate some sustainability knowledge. Now, how to do that? I mean, there are various courses, I believe, that Cambridge and Oxford, run. I believe there's a 7-week one on the circular economy. But there are other things that you can perhaps, look to kind of bolster up. And I think that's quite a good segue into what ICAW itself is doing, right?
Yeah.
So at the council conference, we discussed about launching sometime this year the ICAW qualification on sustainability. But already there's a lot of information as a member I have access to understand what do I need to know in order to do my business better. So I think the messaging to people who are applying for jobs and so on, it can't hurt to have some element of sustainability in your CV. But
Thank
Nick,
you.
I don't know.
Yeah, so if I can just build, I completely agree with what Dr. Faiz said, right? But if I can only just maybe expand a little bit on the HR element, I think it's also true the other way around, at least from what I saw in, let's say, somewhere like North America, where it's, a company's credentials around ESG is an important criteria for talent in choosing to go to that particular a particular company to work, right? So it's also true the other way around. It's not just companies looking for students or graduates with some credentials around ESG and sustainability. It's also the top talents actually looking for companies and in sort of like selecting or making the decision in terms of where they want to work, actually choosing companies that's got really, really strong or stronger ESG credentials, right? Or the sustainability agenda is very much strong. And if you take, for example, like tech companies in the Silicon Valley, I suppose they're maybe a little bit more righteous around there and stuff like that. But I've spoken to a lot of tech companies, and they said, and the one feedback which sort of like resonate, was sort of like I recall hearing is that the sort of like the war for talent also sort of like is also won and lost on this factor, right? So these two companies may be looking for engineering talents, for example, but one is maybe in a particular segment or sector that is less green than the other. What they're finding is students, especially the young kids, are gravitating more towards those with the greener kind of like credentials, right? So going forward, and again, this will be different in different parts of the world. But I truly believe that that could be another key consideration for, especially we got prospective graduates on the call, that build up your green kind of credentials definitely, but also in your choice when you're going out to look for companies. I believe that that could be a potential kind of like sort of like decision-making factor for them, right? So yeah, that's probably an area that I think corporates around the world would need to look at. Maybe in Malaysia, not quite so yet, but again, it's about the preference and what the younger generation wants, right? So some of the young generations, they're not doing it for the kind of like big salary and position. They want to be doing something that's meaningful. They want to be doing something that they feel that they are contributing, and the company that they're working for is contributing towards a greater good. So I think that could be a key kind of like factor moving forward as well. Which positions, I agree with Dr. Faiz, positions ICAW very, very well. ICAW students and graduates or qualification holders, we've got who's got some green credentials will be very much sought after, I believe, by these companies.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
Even for us, we've never had a problem finding people for our sustainability unit. But going back to that diversity issue, we're able to hire people that we would not necessarily have looked at in the past. So, for example, anyone with a chemistry or biology background is of interest to us, either on the healthcare or on the ESG agenda. I just recently hired someone who came up with a meteorology degree, because weather patterns are going to be very important. particularly for our plantation clients and so on. So the point is that if you look, for example, at a firm like mine, which is not just on the audit side, but we also have consulting, actually, we're looking for all kinds of people to come into the consulting side. In fact, just to share a number, I remember last year when, I mean, you know, it's always interesting, right? When suddenly the big four start putting out adverts, you kind of wonder, why are we doing this? Well, the answer is very simple. There's money to be had. I think the number I saw was that they're predicting in the next 5 years, the consulting spend on ESG, sustainability matters, is somewhere between 12 to 31 billion US.
Wow.
So that's why every consulting firm, even the McKinseys and BCGs, all have sustainability, because they know that for big companies to pivot away from oil and gas, to be able to change their practices will take a humongous effort. So we hope you hire us.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I think that's where, very rightly so, that why ICW is doing this session, why we're sharing this information, is because ICW, as a global professional membership body, our members would have gone through a series of examination, the knowledge that they've learned, whether there's accounting, business strategy, tax, law, the language of business and finance. And they've gone through the training. And of course, as members, every year, they have to fulfill certain continuous professional development, we call it CPD, to ensure that they continue to stay relevant and up to date in their respective area of work. So for students who choose to be trained towards the professional qualification, our qualification at the moment has all been adjusted. The curriculum has all been adjusted to reflect the goals, to reflect the importance of these are the future of the profession. And our ICW website, we have a sustainability hub. For those people who are inquiring and like to know more, go to the ICW website and they can access and learn more about it. So this is actually like I said earlier, a knowledge as well as educational session. So I hope they will take away with at least something to take away, that they can go to our website to refer and learn more about it.
But just maybe to add a point, this is not just audit and consulting. I have people in my tax side who are now building up their knowledge, because carbon taxes will come eventually. And of course, our clients obviously have to export into the EU, and therefore will have to face those rules. So pretty much every part of a consulting firm will be used. Even my section, which deals with transactions, it's interesting that within the due diligence side, it's a whole section about sustainability. So for example, the waste management of some of the companies that our clients are buying, have they been hiding it on the ground, and how much is it going to cost to take it all out again? I mean, all those things, probably weren't top of our mind in the past. But now it's become integral to the due diligence process itself.
Yeah, which leads very quickly, into my second questions really about some of these important, why the accountancy profession is tackling some of these important social environmental challenges, like just now what you meant, what Dato' you're just saying about even energy, taking it out, how do you measure them, etc. And why, and basically why not? Because ICW, as a professional body, half of our members are working in business. About 80% of the FTSE 100 companies have an ICW member of its board. The ultimate aim really is to use the profession to influence the change and to change the way the wider business community works and how our members drives these changes. I mean, Encik Rizal mentioned COP26, it was just quite recent. So the Honorable Alok Sharma, who was the president of the 2021 UN Climate Conference, the COP26, and negotiated the Glasgow Pact, I think it was only in November last year. So he is an ICW chartered accountant. He read applied physics with electronics. So really, there is no better trained than a chartered accountant to do this, because working out how to measure them, and then how do we capture information, how do we report it, how do we make use of the information, and these are all what chartered accountants are trained to do. So leading to my question to Dato' Faiz, we talk about sustainability is as much a financial reporting issue as well as a non-financial reporting issue. I have the the privilege really to hear some of your views on how climate change and biodiversity impacts the way we do business. And well, we are basically heading to trouble if in the long term we don't do it. But it also opens up a lot of new opportunities and jobs that doesn't exist. I particularly enjoy, we talk about mangroves and don't buy property near the coast, and if we don't do anything. So it is quite important. So for the students who are here today and looking to we always use future-proof their career. You mentioned data just now, but it's also how do they embed climate change and the wider sustainability issue into their choice of career. We touched a little bit later just now, a little bit about the kind of companies that you want to go in. Mr. Nick Rizal mentioned it, but Dato, could you just share your thoughts a little bit more on why they have to choose and how do they choose in terms of when they choose a company, where they should choose their career from? Thank you.
Well, of course, I'm biased. I hope they come and join us. but I guess it comes back to what you want to do in life, right? So it perhaps is not as common now to enter into the professions. But what I would say as a Malaysian is most Malaysians who have an accounting qualification find getting jobs around the world very easy. So every time I go to London, I see more and more Malaysians who have left firms here applying and working for the Big Four in London. So the first point is, we are an IFRS country, right? We adopted IFRS even before the Singaporeans. And so what it means is that people who have trained in Malaysia in accounting are extremely laku around the world. We speak English, we don't mind traveling, but we understand how to apply IFRS, which is a global standard. Beyond that, I would say that it depends on your mindset. Many organizations have management training programs. It's always good to try and join that because in a way they're grooming you up to be part of the C-suite within the next 20, 30 years. And that's usually a good way to kind of embed yourself and become part of their organization better rather than just kind of percolating through the ranks. The other approach, as I mentioned, is, join an accounting firm and have a profession because, as we mentioned, most of our members don't work in accounting firms. Most of our members are actually members in business. But I think to a man or woman, they will tell you that experience of being able to see different companies as part of your training is very useful. Because, under the Companies Act, any question I put to them, they have to answer. Right? It's no obligation to answer my questions. Of course, I don't abuse it by asking difficult questions, so sometimes you have to. But my point is, it's a very weird profession where in your 3 or 4 years, you actually get to see a number of companies. And I usually ask myself a question when I do an audit, which is, would I buy that company? What's special about it? What niche have they got? What's their cash flow like? And it's interesting to me, right? Because you then see the relevance of what we're doing in terms of giving some trust to those numbers, but it also gives you a chance to actually understand how they make their money. And then later, when you leave the firm, you can go off and use it in other fields. So my suggestion would be, if you are interested in the profession, and bear in mind that these days you don't have to join an accounting firm to be ICW. You can join RHB or any company that has a member there as a training partner. And so you can go down the corporate path, albeit that you get a piece of paper at some point saying you're a chartered accountant, or you could join an accounting firm, get that piece of paper, and then see which division within that firm may be of interest to you. Well, except for tax. Tax is a bit weird, but
I would agree.
Fields, consulting, those are quite open to chartered accountants. Tax takes a different kind of mindset now.
No, very, very rightly said when we mentioned sustainability in terms of we talk about SDG, but I also look at your career, the choice of your career, the profession that you choose is also there's a sustainability of your career. So I would like to ask Encik Nick, really, you were previously trained as an auditor, and then you were in the investment role for many years, and now you're back into the what I call financial reporting, the chief financial report officer at RHB. Could you share, to me, that is the agility and the flexibility of moving from the profession to the corporate, to do different things. Would you like to share a little bit in terms of your view or your sustainability of your career? And was it difficult to change when you move into the different type of roles?
Yeah. Okay. For me, I suppose this will resonate with most, if not all, everyone, right? Especially with the younger generation today. I took the view whereby, I wanted to manage my career from day one, right? And I wanted to do what I really wanted to do, because for me, I need to be enjoying what I'm doing. I need to be able to wake up in the morning saying, hey, I'm quite happy to go to work, right? The moment that doesn't happen, then I'm telling myself, okay, it's time for me to do something else. Which is probably why I tend to stay a little bit long at companies that I've worked for. So just to share with you, prior to joining RHB last year, I had spent 10 years with Khazanah. And prior to that, I had actually spent 10 years with Shell. And that's because, I wanted to learn an industry. And this is something just building out on what Datuk Faiz said, right? When you are in your 3, 4, 5 years of your, let's say you join an audit firm immediately after university to get your articleship, to get your professional qualifications, you not only get to learn about companies, but you get to learn about the whole industry that the company operates in, right? Which is why sometimes, most times after 3 to 4 years, you get specialists. And I have specialists, for example, ex-colleagues in audit firms who are now CFOs, CEOs of, let's say, telcos. And they were actually doing audits of telcos during that time in the early stage of their career. So coming back to me, I found that the transition moving from practice to a big MNC, traveling around the world, coming back, working for a sovereign fund back home, doing my bit of national service. And then after 10 years saying, okay, enough of that, let's do something else. And then going back into corporate Malaysia, working for a public listed bank, going back as a CFO. Now, I found the transition to be quite smooth for me, because firstly, I wanted to do the transition. But secondly, I know that I've been equipped in my career, even from the start, with good education, fantastic professional qualification, that immediately sort of like is the recognition that you get, right? So even, for example, when I moved to Royal Dutch Shell and I was going around the world with them, and even within Shell, you still have to apply for your roles in your position. I felt that being a chartered accountant, an ICAEW chartered accountant, made it an easy conversation. It's almost like, when I was like, and this was true with all my interviews thus far, right? And maybe I'm quite lucky that way. They don't get to, they don't test my technical abilities so much. So it becomes more of a conversation rather than, getting me to really do discounted cash flows and stuff like that, which is, for what you would expect when you go into, let's say, Khazanah. And just to share with you, when I went to Khazanah, I actually asked them, I said that, look, I've got no investments experience whatsoever. I never worked in private equity. I never worked in an investment house. What is it about me that made Khazanah want to sort of like employ me? And I was told by at the time basically the chief investment officer, the head of investments, who basically said two things. One, you're an accountant, so you know the numbers. Secondly, is because you've got operational experience, because just before coming to Khazanah, I had spent 10 years with Shell, and you've got international exposure. So that was enabled by, the qualification that I had, right? So if you trace it back, I felt that maybe if I didn't have an ICAEW, I could have maybe taken the same route, but maybe I wouldn't have achieved what I've achieved thus far, right? And it's the same for me for moving to Khazanah, to bank, to a financial industry which is like so highly regulated and very technical. I went in straight as a CFO. I've never been a CFO before in my life. I've worked with different CFOs. I've been on boards and stuff like that. But when I went for the interview at RHB and I told them, look, I don't have CFO experience. And they looked at me and said, but you're a chartered accountant. You should know this, right? So yeah, I need to brush up on my MFRSs and stuff like that. But it shouldn't take me that long. I say, exactly, like coming in fresh. So yeah, that transition, let's say, to RHB was a little bit challenging because I was going into a new industry, a new kind of like C-suite type of role. Like, as I mentioned, highly regulated, highly technical. But it didn't take me that long to dust off the accounting books and the standards for me to get up to speed very, very quickly. And companies need that nowadays. right? Especially at the higher up you go, they don't have 6 months to basically train you into the job, which is why I think for the younger callers on the on this webinar, you're in a great position because companies will take time and they will invest to train you. And if you go in there with a qualification like ICAW, they will be very willing and very open to want to do that because it's in their interest to sort of like grab you as a talent and to sort of like grow you into future senior positions.
Thank you.
Maybe
Thank
just
you.
one other point. I think, but let me just be blunt. It's not easy being ICW, right? The exams, I mean, what do you got now? 15 papers? So
For non-accounting graduates, it would be 15
right.
years.
So especially, I mean, like in my case, right? I didn't do maths, I didn't do accounting. So it was a complete shock coming into an accounting firm. But it's not rocket science. You know,
yeah.
I didn't have to do quadratic equations. I didn't have to use the reverse Polish calculator. There was no quantum physics involved. You just needed plus, minus, divide, times.
Yeah.
And eventually it clicks, right? Because numbers are the language of business. You know, businesses measure their success by numbers, right? When you want to raise funding, when you want to pay a dividend, when you want to justify a bonus, ultimately you will come back to the numbers. And so that's why I think, you know, echoing what Nick says, I can't think of many professions where you spend 3 or 4 years, you know, in your younger years, taking what is actually quite a tough exam. But when you get it, I tell you one, the satisfaction. 2 is the fact that you know that you are in a very small bunch of people that are good enough to be ICW. And that's why the opportunities are there, because people know that if you're a chartered English accountant, you can do pretty much anything, right? Because you have the agility of mind to be able to do things. And so throughout my career, I mean, I was in financial services, I was in plantations, I did, you know, investigations, I was, you know, an administrator to an airline. I mean, all these things were different. There's no book, there's no SOP on how to haggle with a lessor, but you figure it out because you understand the language of business and you use it. And that's why I think ICW is extraordinarily laku.
Yeah,
It's
it's also like you say, you know, one of the key thing away is they are the trusted professionals. They are trusted to safeguard data, information, they're accurate, they're objective, it's the training, and there's a code of ethics that we all bound by. And I think
we throw you out if you do naughty things, by the way, as well. So we do throw people out. But to your point, it does have a certain standing in the financial sector if you're ICW. There's no doubt about it. And to me, the asset test, and I'll put that also to Nick, is would I have done what I did before, which is train as a lawyer, become a barrister, become an accountant? The answer is yes. Right? Because what I found was that as a lawyer, I was a bit more articulate than my fellow accountant.
I can imagine, yes.
One of those things. So Nick, would you have done that whole path again, the same way?
Oh yeah, gladly. In fact, I actually made the decision to become an ICAW chartered accountant, and not any chartered accountant, when I was doing my SPM in Form 5.
Wow.
That's why I took principal accounting, and I have to give credit to my dad, because I told my dad, you know, you have one of those conversations with your dad that say, okay, you're 16, 17, what do you want to do in your life? Say, I want to be a big boss of a big company. And said that, and he looked at me and said, okay, go and get your chartered accountancy first, go and do your ICAW. And he's not a chartered accountant, right? He's a marketing guy, but he's a corporate guy in Malaysia. And he had seen his peers, ICAU, you say, you see uncle, you see uncle that one, he's a chartered accountant, ICAW. They all went UK university, go ICAW, look at him, CEO of airline, CEO of bank. And I said, okay, I'll go down that route. So even over the 5th form, I decided, and no regrets whatsoever, because I personally believe that I will not be where I am today, and I'm not like the richest guy out there and so on. I'm comfortable, right? But what I have is 27 years of my career, my professional career has been really meaningful to me, because, I spend, I probably over the years spend more time at work in the office than I do at home. If you think about it, right? You're at home for 10 hours in a day. The other 14 hours, you must be doing something else. And, yeah, that's one thing, like chartered accountants tend to work a bit hard, depending on what company and what audit firm and what industry you're in as well. So that's up and downs, but yeah, definitely it's been so, I'm just sort of like so fulfilled, content in my career, and I've still got another 10, 15 years to go, and looking forward to what will the journey take me next.
Very good, very good.
Yeah.
In fact, that will brings us very nicely to the last question. We have last 5 minutes left, and this particular student, and who was actually very interested to hear from the speakers, what is the one important lesson that you learned from your career that you can share with us today? Encik Nika or Dato' Faiz, would you like to? I know one important lesson. I mean, it's difficult to have one, but yeah.
So mine would be finish what you start. Meaning to say that a partly qualified accountant is meaningless. You're either an accountant or you're not, and that's why, for example, in law, I went all the way to doing my bar, right, before I decided that I wasn't going to continue my career as a lawyer. So that would be my advice. Whatever you do, and by the way, there's no neat thing saying you must do this, and therefore you get that. I sometimes find that the shittiest jobs are the ones that you learn the most, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yes. And so I have always taken a view that I don't care whether the job is good or bad or difficult, whatever. I'm sure I learned something out of it. But the point is to finish what you start. Don't give up halfway and find all sorts of excuses not to finish it the full way through.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, I think that's very, very good advice. The one thing I've got loads, but the one thing that sort of like jumps out is which someone told me a long time ago, and that's basically pardon my French, but don't bullshit. It's just as simple as that. If you don't know, say you don't know. People respect you more when you say, look, I don't know, I'll go and find out. And as chartered accountants, you have the ability, well, at least what I noticed, the ability to bounce back really, really quickly with a solution. But the worst thing that you can do is to make things up and try and bullshit your way around it, because once you get found out, you lose that bit of credibility, right? So the next time around, nobody's gonna, so that person's not gonna sort of like believe what you say, even when you've got it spot on, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing, and I know it's you're young, you want to impress, but sometimes, and I know for a fact that there are some leaders or some managers out there who will purposely put you on the spot just to test how you react, right? And I found that in my 27 years, I've taken that advice, and I've just, if I don't know, I just say I don't know. I say, boss, I don't know, and then you get whacked for about 5 minutes, and then you go away, figure it out, and then come back and say, boss, I've got a solution, and say, great. And the boss will remember you for coming back with a solution, right? That's what you want the boss to remember you for, not for trying to make up some story and bullshitting your way around. So that's my piece of advice.
Thank you. Thank you. Very good advice. And I think definitely it's all part of the training, and why some of them, when they say 3 years, is all the development skills that we are looking at, not just the qualifications, not just exams, it's not just theoretical, it's really about putting theory into practice, and actually a lot of the skills that is part of the 3 years the training, they develop their skills. So with that, we hope that you take away how chartered accountants save the world. And I think the question that we like to ask the students to make sure that how can you be the agent of change that the world needs? So with that, I hand over back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator and our speakers, for the insightful session. Before we end today's session, we would like to showcase a video that we have prepared. Enjoy.
What will your job look like in 10 years' time? The world is rapidly changing, and so is the role of chartered accountants.
sustainability is being integrated into mainstream business, and the accounting profession is at the heart of this. The accountants decide what information is collected, how decisions are made, and how the outcome of those decisions are being presented to the outside world.
Are you ready? To help you prepare, we'll introduce you to chartered accountants already at the forefront of social change and leading thinkers who believe chartered accountants are critical in solving some of the most urgent challenges in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our first theme, Trust, will explore the role that chartered accountants play in safeguarding data and information that is accurate and objective. Later this year, we'll look at diversity and inclusion, sustainability and access to education, and consider how these themes will shape the profession for the next decade and beyond. How will you gain the right set of skills, knowledge and experience to be the agents of change that the world needs? Visit icaew.com.
This marks the end of today's event. A friendly reminder for all of you to tune in tomorrow's webinars. We'll be having CIMB, Bank Islam, British American Tobacco, Axiata, Top Glove, and RHB coming together to speak in tomorrow's session. Once again, thank you everyone for tuning in today. Goodbye.